All right, buckle up, everyone, because last night in the NBA, oh man, was it a wild one. 5 games, and I swear each one was like a completely different chapter in this playoff race story that's unfolding. I mean, we had blowouts that had me honestly wondering, are some of these teams already mentally checked out thinking about next season? But then we also had some games that came down to the absolute wire, nail biters, edge of your seat stuff. And I think we even might have gotten a glimpse of a future championship contender, or at least a team that's really starting to show its potential. So yeah, we've got a lot to unpack here, folks, but don't worry, we've got you covered.
Yeah, and what I find really interesting is that as we get closer and closer to the playoffs, we're really starting to see a separation.
Mhm.
Like those contenders are starting to emerge from the pack. And last night it gave us a lot to think about.
All right. So to paint the picture for everyone listening, we had the Clippers going head to head with the Kings, the Pistons taking on the Trailblazers, the Cavs facing off against the Bucks. Then we had the Timberwolves versus the Spurs, and finally, to close out the night, it was the 76ers versus the Jazz.
A packed night.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into it with that Clippers Kings game. I mean, a 1 point difference.
Oh,
111, 110. Talk about a finish that had me clutching everything.
right. I mean, that's the Clippers we've all come to expect, right? They know how to perform when the pressure's on. And, everyone talks about Kawhi Leonard and his clutch scoring, which of course is amazing. But what really stood out to me in this game, especially those last few minutes, was his defensive awareness. I mean,
Yep.
it was like he was reading the Kings' minds. He was anticipating their plays, disrupting their passing lanes, just forcing them into these really tough contested shots. Honestly, that's championship level basketball IQ on display right there.
Wow, you're right. I hadn't even thought about that. We always focus on the scoring, but you're absolutely right. His defense was incredible, like a wall. But hold on a second. We can't forget about De'Aaron Fox on the Kings. I mean, the guy almost single-handedly stole that game away from the Clippers.
Do you think the Kings are maybe a dark horse team that we need to start paying more attention to?
They're definitely playing with a lot of heart, a lot of passion. And Fox, I mean, he's explosive. There's no doubt about that. But they need more consistency if they really want to make a serious playoff push. I mean, their offensive rating was good, yeah, but defensively they struggled, especially against those strategic plays the Clippers were throwing at them. Look, they're a young team. There's a lot of potential there, but they're not quite there yet.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's shift gears now to the Pistons and the Trailblazers. This one went in the opposite direction. A high-scoring shootout with the Pistons coming out on top, 119-112. Yeah, the Pistons' ball movement in this game, I mean, it was poetry in motion. They were swinging that ball around, finding the open man, knocking down shots. It was beautiful to watch. And Cade Cunningham, man, he was facilitating the offense like a seasoned veteran, racking up assists left and right. It's clear that their offensive system, it's clicking, it's working.
Yeah, it's all coming together for them. And on the other side, Damian Lillard, he did what he does, right? He dropped a ton of points, but even that wasn't enough. I guess it just goes to show you, sometimes even the best individual performance just can't overcome a team that's firing on all cylinders.
Absolutely. And this game, it was a perfect example of the Pistons' depth really shining through. They had, get this, 6 players scoring in double digits. That's what makes them such a tough matchup. You can't just focus on shutting down 1 or 2 guys. You got to guard everyone.
Yeah, it's a nightmare to defend against a team like that. Okay, let's talk about a game that I think sent a message to the rest of the league. The Cavs, they completely dismantled the Bucks, 112-100. I mean, is it too early to call them the team to beat in the East? Are we jumping the gun here?
Well, there. Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
It's live.
But they're making a strong case. I'll give you that. Their defense was suffocating. I mean, they held the Bucks to their lowest scoring output of the entire season. And Donovan Mitchell, he wasn't just scoring. He was making smart decisions, drawing fouls, creating opportunities for his teammates. It was a complete performance.
Yeah, okay. I'll hold back on the championship parade for now. But you got to admit, it's pretty exciting to see a young team like the Cavs clicking like this. Especially considering the Bucks. I mean, even with Giannis out there, they just looked, I don't know, lost. Out of sync.
It's a great sign for Cavs fans, for sure. But let's see if they can keep this up, maintain this level of play against some of the other top teams in the league. Because the true test of a contender, it's consistency. Can they bring it every single night? That's the question.
Okay, now let's talk about a game that had everyone buzzing. The Timberwolves, They put up a whopping, a ridiculous 141 points against the Spurs, winning 141-124. That's a statement win if I've ever seen one.
Anthony Edwards, man, he was simply unstoppable. Driving to the basket, hitting threes from everywhere, even dishing out some nice assists. Spurs had absolutely no answer for his athleticism, his offensive versatility. It was a show.
Yeah, he was incredible. But was it all Edwards, or is there something more to this Timberwolves offensive explosion that, that makes them a team that we really need to be watching out for in the playoffs?
Well, they've always had that firepower, right?
Yeah. Oh.
But now their execution is sharper, their decision-making is quicker, they're sharing the ball well, they're moving without the ball, and they're creating these high-percentage shots. It's not just about their offensive rating anymore. It's about their efficiency.
Yeah.
And that combination, that can be really dangerous, really dangerous.
All right. We are on a roll here. Let's finish strong with the 76ers pulling out a close one against the Jazz, 126-122. Another nail-biter. These close games, man, they really get the heart pumping.
This game, it really highlighted the 76ers' mental toughness, their resilience. The Jazz, they made a late run, cut the lead down to just 2 points with a minute left on the clock. It was intense. But Joel Embiid, he stayed composed, hit a clutch free throw, and then grabbed a huge defensive rebound to seal the deal. It was impressive.
Yeah, it seems like Embiid, he always comes through in those big moments. He doesn't shy away from the pressure. But let's talk about the Jazz for a second. They put up a good fight, almost pulled off the upset. Do you think they have what it takes to make some noise in the playoffs? Are they a legitimate threat?
They have the talent, no question about it. Donovan Mitchell is a bona fide star, and their supporting cast is solid. But they tend to struggle, and this is a trend we've seen, against teams with a really strong interior defense. And the 76ers? Well, they've got Embiid. So if they want to make a deep playoff run, they're going to have to find a way to overcome that weakness.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, haven't we? 5 games, 5 different storylines, and I think we've gotten some really good insight into which teams are the contenders and maybe which teams are the pretenders. But before we move on to the next part, I got to ask you this. We saw some teams with these high-powered offenses tonight, like the Pistons and the Timberwolves, but then we also saw the importance of that locked-on defense, like with the Clippers and the Cavs. So I'm curious, what do you think is more important for playoff success in today's NBA? Is it offense or defense?
Man, that is a great question. And it's a tough one to answer, honestly, because the league is evolving so rapidly. The game is changing right before our eyes. But I think if I had to choose, I'd say the teams that can find that right balance, the teams that can combine that explosive offense with a suffocating defense, those are the teams that will ultimately have the edge. And you know what? I think we should dive a little deeper into that in the next part. What do you say?
Let's do it.
It's funny you should mention that because the way the game is played, it's becoming almost like positionless. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
We're seeing these guards that are out there rebounding like they're centers, and then you've got these big men shooting threes like they're Steph Curry or something.
Right. It's wild.
Yeah. So, finding that balance between offense and defense is becoming even more crucial, I think, in this new era of basketball.
Totally. It feels like every night I'm seeing some highlight, and it's like a 7-footer pulling up for a step-back 3. Crazy.
It's insane.
So, okay, I think we've established that the ideal playoff team, they need both. They got to have that offensive firepower, but they also got to have that defensive grit. So looking at last night's games, were there any teams that really embodied that balance for you?
Well, the Cavs, they're definitely an interesting case. They've got that dynamic scoring duo with Mitchell and Garland, but their defense, honestly, it's been their calling card all season long. They're aggressive, they communicate so well on the court, and they just force opponents into these really tough shots. Like their ability to shut down Giannis and pretty much the entire Bucks team. That was a perfect example of what they can do on defense.
I see your point. But what about a team like the Timberwolves? They're putting up points like it's nothing, but can they actually stop anyone when it really counts, in those high-pressure playoff moments?
Well, that's the million-dollar question right there, isn't it?
Right.
Edwards is electric. There's no doubt about that. And their offense, it could be explosive, really explosive. But their defensive efficiency, I got to be honest, it's still a bit of a concern. They can outscore teams. Yeah, definitely. We saw that.
Oh.
But in a playoff series where every possession matters, they're going to have to figure out how to get those stops consistently.
So are you saying they might be more pretender than contender? I guess we'll just have to wait and see if they can prove you wrong.
We'll see. We'll see.
What about a team like the Clippers, though? They always seem to have the experience and the talent on both ends of the court.
They're definitely in that contender conversation.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got Kawhi Leonard. He's a proven champion. And Paul George, he's an elite two-way player.
Hmm.
But they've been battling injuries all season. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's true.
And their health, it's going to be a huge factor, probably the biggest factor in their playoff hopes.
Ugh, injuries. They're always the wild card, aren't they?
The worst.
So, like, just one injury and it can completely derail a team's entire season. So frustrating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Need a little bit of luck on your side, that's for sure, if you want to make a deep playoff run. And speaking of luck, let's not forget about the 76ers. I mean, they haven't always looked dominant this season, that's for sure, but they just have this knack for winning those close games.
You're right. They always seem to find a way to pull it out when it matters most. Embiid, he's a force of nature. We've talked about that. But yeah, I've been really impressed with James Harden's playmaking this season. It's like he's not just focused on scoring anymore. He's setting up his teammates, dishing out these beautiful assists he's creating.
He's adapted his game so well. I mean, he's become more of a floor general, a facilitator,
Yeah.
and it's made the 76ers a much more balanced team. Now, they're still a work in progress, no doubt, but they're a team that I think no one wants to face in the playoffs.
Yeah.
No one.
I agree with you there. So, to bring it back to our listener for a second, we've talked about a lot of different teams tonight, and we've highlighted, what we think are some of those key factors for playoff success. But what's the one thing, what's that one nugget of wisdom that you want our listener to take away from this deep dive? Like, what's the thing that's going to make them sound like a basketball genius at their next watch party?
I think pay attention to the teams that are playing with that sense of urgency. The teams that are hungry, the teams that are desperate to prove themselves.
I like that.
And look beyond just the box scores, the individual stats. Look at the little things, like the hustle plays, the communication on defense, the willingness to share the ball. Those things, those are the signs of a team that's ready to make a real run in the playoffs.
I love that. It's not just about talent. It's about that heart, that grit, that collective desire to win. And honestly, those are the teams that are the most fun to watch.
Absolutely.
Okay, so before we wrap up this part, I want to throw a little bit of a curveball at you. We've been focusing on the teams at the top of the standings, the usual suspects. But what about the teams, the teams that are fighting for those last playoff spots? Do you think there's a Cinderella story brewing somewhere in the league?
Oh, there's always a Cinderella story, right? That's what makes the NBA so great. And you know what? Looking back at last night's games, there was one team that kind of caught my eye. Now, they didn't win, but they showed a lot of fight against, honestly, a much stronger opponent.
Okay, don't leave us hanging. Who are you thinking of?
Keep an eye on the Sacramento Kings.
The Kings, really?
Yeah, I'm serious. They're young, they're athletic, and they play with this fearless swagger that I really like.
I mean, they did lose to the Clippers, though.
They did, yes. But they didn't back down, not even for a second. They pushed the Clippers to the absolute limit. De'Aaron Fox, again, he was phenomenal. And they're young players, man. They showed a lot of promise. Now, do they have a long way to go? Yes, absolutely. But they have the potential, the raw talent, to be a really dangerous team if they can put it all together.
All right. You've convinced me. I'm adding the Kings to my watch list. I'm officially intrigued.
I think you should be. Because sometimes, the most exciting stories, they come from the teams you least expect.
I love that you brought up the Kings. It's so easy to get caught up in the big names and those championship contenders, but sometimes those underdog stories, man, those are the ones that really grab you.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what makes the NBA so unpredictable, so exciting. You just never know what's going to happen. Any team on any given night can pull off a surprise.
So for our listener who's out there and maybe feeling a little overwhelmed, right, with all this information we've been throwing at them, what's that one key takeaway, that one nugget of wisdom you want them to walk away with from this deep dive?
I'd say don't be afraid to challenge those assumptions. Don't just go with the popular narratives, the stuff everyone's saying. Look deeper, analyze those trends, and form your own opinions. Be your own basketball guru.
Like you said earlier, right? Don't just rely on those box scores. Pay attention to the nuances of the game, the stuff you don't always see at first glance.
Exactly. Basketball, it's such a complex, dynamic sport. And there's always something more to learn. Always.
And on that note, as we wrap up this episode, this deep dive, I want to leave our listener with a bit of a thought-provoking question. We've talked a lot about individual teams, specific players. But what about the evolution of the game itself? Where is basketball headed?
Oh man, that's a fascinating topic. The NBA, it's constantly evolving, right? From rule changes to new playing styles, it's always adapting. And I think it's really a reflection of the athletes themselves. Their increasing skill level, their athleticism. It's forcing the game to change.
Right. I mean, we're seeing more three-point shooting than ever before, more positionless basketball, a huge emphasis on pace and space. So where do you see the game going in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years? What's your prediction?
Well, I think we're going to continue to see those lines between positions blur even further. Like those traditional roles, point guard, center, they're going to become less defined. Players are going to need to be versatile. They're going to have to be able to handle the ball, shoot from outside, and defend multiple positions. Like they've got to be able to do it all.
So are we talking about players like Giannis Antetokounmpo, like Luka Doncic becoming the norm? Is that the future of the NBA?
Exactly. Those guys, they're the prototypes, the blueprints for what's to come.
Yeah.
And I think the teams that can adapt to this evolving style of play, those are the teams that are going to dominate in the years to come. No question about it.
Man, it's going to be so exciting to watch how it all unfolds. And for our listener out there, I encourage you, keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep enjoying the ride. There's always something new to discover in the world of basketball.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And never, never underestimate the power of a good underdog story.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll catch you next time for another exciting breakdown of all the latest NBA action.